Okay, let's begin. We are on Daf Chet Amud Aleph 8a3. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, okay, if you remember the halakha, we talked about the idea that when a person throws a stone and then the guy puts his head out the window, right? So it was not there at the time when he threw the stone. So we mentioned the idea that at that point, there's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds that there's no galut, and we did not yet clarify whether or not the Tana Kama and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov are actually arguing about this. Tanu Rabbanan umatzah prat lemamtzi et atzmo. Where did the exclusion come from in trying to explain whether or not you're going to be chayav galut for the guy who pops his head out the window after you threw the rock? Because the pasuk says umatzah et chavero, that the rock finds his friend. Jean-Luc, I think your kippah fell off, right? But umatzah et chavero, but that excludes lemamtzi, to a case where a person, the rock didn't find him, his head found the rock. It went the other way around. Mikana Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says from that pasuk, if after the launching he stuck his head out, halakha is patur. Ask the Gemara, 1 second. Lememra, are you trying to tell me de matzah meikara mashma, that when you say matzah, that it means that it means something that was there already before, right? Umatzah prat lematzui. However, right, the next braita that we're going to bring now in the Gemara is going to bring a different outcome from the same word of umatzah. The pasuk says umatzah, and he finds. Take a look for 1 second in the pasuk alongside the Gemara. You see bet v'ish ki lo yeh lo goel. If a person he's penniless and he loses his property, and now he needs to redeem the property. If a person does not have a goel, v'isiga yado, and finally he manages to be able to afford it, umatzah kidei geulato, and he finds enough to be able to redeem. Okay, so what does the Gemara over there say? Prat, it's coming to exclude umatzah lematzui, exclude something which already was found. So again, in our case, what are we saying? Matzah prat lemamtzi. So in other words, matzah excludes something that was already there before. So if you're telling me matzah means from this point and on, chronologically, okay? Umatzah from this point and on, not from this point and prior, right? If that's how you're telling me, is the reading of the word matzah when it comes to redemption of a house, of an asset, so then how could it be the exact opposite is the limud over here? Over here we want matzah to exclude something that's only there afterwards. And over there you're saying umatzah to exclude something that was already there. So it doesn't make sense. Shelo yimkor berachok v'yigal b'karov. You can't sell a field that he has somewhere else and buy this one because he already had that from before. So we're talking about when the matzah comes from something you don't have yet in the redemption. So you're using the word matzah in two different cases to prove two different opposite results. Bira'ah yig'o b'yafeh. You shouldn't take a negative field, a field that's not a great field that he owns, sell that, and then pay off the debt on the better field. Okay? So the Gemara has a problem with the limud of umatzah. The Gemara answers, Amar Rava. Rava explains. Does everyone understand the question we just asked? Yeah, is everyone clear? Yeah, we're clear on the question? Amar Rava. Rava answers, Hacha mi'inyane dikra. Over here, we're learning from the context of the sentence. V'hatam mi'inyane dikra. And over there also, we're learning from the context of the sentence. Hatam mi'inyane dikra. Over there, we're learning from the case of the pasuk. Umatzah dumya d'isiga yado. So let's take a look again. Look at the pasuk again. It's right at the first wide line in the pasuk part of the column. V'ish ki lo yihyeh lo goel, and it will be a person who does not have someone to help him redeem. V'hisiga yado, and now he made some money, right? Umatza, and he found. So the same way, v'hisiga yado means now you were able to afford as opposed to before. Ma'hisiga yado mehashta, just like the words that now I can afford come from now and on. Af matzah nami mehashta. So too, the word matzah in the same sentence, following the word v'hisiga yado, has to mean from here and on. Hacha, also over here, we learn from the context of the pasuk. Hacha min yanei dekra. Also over here by an axe, we say the same thing. Umatzah dumya diyar. Let's take a look at the pasuk again. It's the first pasuk in the little pasuk column on the thing. Can you find it? It's that right down over there. That right there, right before the turn. Ve'asher yavo et re'eo bayar. Person comes with his friend into the forest. Lachtov etzim, to chop wood. V'nitcha yado begarzen, and he grabs the axe. Lichrot ha'etz, to cut down the tree. V'nashal ha'bazem ha'etz, and the iron comes off of the tree. Umatzah et re'eu, and it finds his friend. So just like over here, we're talking about how the guy goes into the forest, and umatzah, but he came with him into the forest. The guy wasn't in the forest before. Af matzah, sorry, umatzah dumya diyar. The matzah over here is compared to the word that comes right before it, which is the element of the forest. Okay? Mayar midi diite me'akara, just like the forest is there before, you came into an existing forest, so too, af matzah nami midi diite me'ikara. So too, matzah is also that which is before, that which is there before. Now, the Gemara over here is doing something that's called generally like a binyan av, similar concept. So in other words, if this is the case with regards to the word of Yar, the forest was there before, and then it says umatzah, and he found, the matzah is going to be the same as that which came before it. The forest was a pre-existing place. Matzah is going to be a pre-existing location. So when it hits this guy, he needed to have been there at the time when Nashal Abarzel Minaetz. Okay. Let's continue. The Gemara says, Hazorek et ha'even, someone who throws a stone. If you remember, the Gemara says that in every case that is compared to this case of Nashal Barzem and Etz, that would also follow the same laws of Galut, right? Remember that? The Gemara says, Abba Shaul Amar, Ma hatavat etzim reshut, af kol reshut. Remember that? Just like chopping wood is, it's up to you. You're doing something you don't have to do. So too are all the things that are going to be learned from chopping wood, which is the daddy case of Galut, are also going to be things that you're allowed to do, but you don't have to do. The Gemara says, Amaleh, how did you learn this idea? Amaleh, Omer Rabbanan leRava, the certain rabbi asked, Rava, Mimai de mechatavat etzim de reshut, dilma mechatavat etzim de sukkah, umechatavat etzim de maracha. You're deciding that chopping wood is something which is voluntary. And therefore you're saying all galut needs to be voluntary, just like chopping wood is voluntary. He says maybe the chopping wood of the pasuk is the chopping wood of ma'aracha for the mizbeach, which you have to do. We raised that in the Mishnah. Or the chatavat etzim for sukkah. In both instances, right, the halacha is that a person needs to build a sukkah, a person needs to have the maracha. And if that's the case, so there are chativat etzim, chopping wood cases, which are a mitzvah. So therefore, how do you know? Vafilu haki amar Rachmana ligli. Still, the Torah said you should be going to galut. In other words, I don't know that the pasuk's talking about those mitzvot, but the Torah didn't exclude those mitzvot, right? The Torah said, guy went to chop wood. Didn't tell us why he went to chop wood. Since that's the case, it's all chopping of wood. And therefore, the chopping of wood, which is for a mitzvah, has never been excluded from the galut. So therefore, you're using an example to exclude from galut any time that the person was doing a mitzvah based on the fact that chopping wood is voluntary and not a mitzvah, there's also wood chopping, which is a mitzvah. So your whole limud is out the window. Amaleh. Rava said to him, Kivan di matzachatuv mitzvah, right? Hashtanami lav mitzvah. This is wild. Let's say I need wood for a sukkah. Is there any mitzvah at all to go chop the wood for the sukkah?
No.
How do you know that?
It's just the materials you need for the sukkah, not
Because the mitzvah is to
put it together.
It's not
to
the
build the
only way.
sukkah.
Mitzvah is to put the sukkah together. Doesn't say anywhere in the pasuk.
You need to chop
and you will go chop the wood, and then you will build the sukkah. Doesn't say that. If I found wood chopped, can I build the sukkah? Of course. If I found wood chopped, can I use it for the ma'arakah? Yes. If that's the case, so says Rava, then the chopping of the wood is also not a mitzvah.
Because there are other ways to achieve it.
Since there's other ways to achieve it, this chopping of the wood is not the mitzvah because I didn't need to chop the wood. I could have bought wood, could have found wood. So therefore, the mitzvah, this act itself is a voluntary act because I could fulfill the mitzvah in another way.
It's like you drive a car to go to the synagogue to make your tefillin and you make an accident, and it's not the mitzvah to disconnect it.
Exactly. It's something that you didn't have to do. You volunteered to do it in this way. That doesn't make the action a mitzvah. Fascinating. Okay? Et beravina Rava. Ravina asks Rava, Yatsa ha'ava maket beno. What's the next case in the Mishnah? A father who has to discipline his son. Ve'arav arodeh talmido. And a rabbi who hits his student. V'shliach bedin. Also shliach bedin. Lema kivan di ilu gamir lav mitzvah. Maybe we should say the same thing. If the kid would have learned, right?
Without
that happening, then there wouldn't be no mitzvah to discipline him.
There is no mitzvah to eat yours. Children.
There's a mitzvah to discipline the child. If it means that you need to slap the child in order to get him to do that, like Shlomo HaMelech says, Chosech shivto soned beno. With spare the rod, spoil the child. Now we already explained last time that much of this is not really relevant in a world where that's going to produce the exact opposite outcome. And in fact, the Shulchan Aruch says that it's a sin to hit your children when they reach an age when they're already at a point where that's not helpful. It's going to actually, but there are certain things that you need to. I mean, I was taught as an example, if a child does something that's dangerous, runs into the road, you make sure to give the child, you slap the child. Why? Because explaining to the child when he's too young the danger of running into the road does not work. It's interesting, recently there was a question that was raised with the rabbi, the child that was banging his head on the floor. And the parents said to the rabbi, what should we do? And the rabbi said, nothing. One time, you can try and explain it, he's baby. No, don't do it. The kid doesn't get it. One time, he'll hit his head a little hard enough. He's not going to kill himself, better than that. He'll hit his hard, it will hurt. And then what will happen? And then the kid will learn not to do it again.
Put a helmet.
So much of childhood. No, but you see, if you put a helmet, the kid doesn't get hurt, and then he doesn't stop. So you have a kid with a helmet smacking his head against the wall until his bar mitzvah. So this idea, the Pasuk, the Gemara is saying that when there would be a case for the father to do this, and then when there would be a case for the Shaliach Beit Din, he was obligated to give Malkut, and then for whatever reason it went to a place where it shouldn't have gone. He hit him one too many times by mistake, and the guy wasn't able to handle it. As an example, in that case, so he's culpable, he's responsible, but it wasn't on purpose, it wasn't to kill him, it wasn't malicious. So he has this Goldilocks scenario that you would have said, okay, that should be galut. Except that the Gemara said, or the Mishnah said, that any time that a person's doing a mitzvah, then there's no galut. So the Gemara says, the same logic you just used for the tree, which is that it could have been done without chopping down the tree, because you could have found chopped wood, you could have bought the wood, so therefore it's not a mitzvah. So let's say the same logic over here. Maybe the kid could have learned without the punishment, or the person could have could have not sinned. I don't know how that works with Shaliach Bedin, by the way. I get it with the other ones, with the first two, with the Av and the Rav. But by Shaliach Bedin, that logic doesn't hold, because that happens only after the person has done it, right? Okay. Anyway, answers the Gemara, at least for the first two. Hatam afagav digami mitzvah. Even a person, even if he will be able to learn without it, still there's a mitzvah. D'chtiv yiser b'necha v'yanichecha v'yiten ma'adanin nafshecha. The Gemara says that even a child that is doing the right thing, so to speak, also there's an element of discipline that's necessary over and above. And I think I was reading this and I was trying to figure out, what does this mean? Is this my father's kitab, where you walk in the morning and they smack you on the fingers? And my father asked him, who was that for? I didn't do anything. And he told them, this is so you shouldn't do something, right? And so they said, right? So is that what that means? No, I don't think so. I think what the Chachamim are saying is something very different. It's saying this element that there are children that are good kids. And you might think that that kid never needs discipline because he's always doing the right thing. And that's enough, right? The problem is that on some level the child is actually doing things out of the goodness of his heart just because he wants to. And there always needs to be, in Yahadut, a mixture of what's called Ahavat Hashem, love of God, and Yirat Shamayim, fear of heaven. Now, fear of heaven doesn't mean, ooh, I'm shaking, Hashem, don't hit me.
Respect.
It means awe, it means respect. Now you'd think, why is that necessary? Surely a better approach and a better relationship with Hashem is a relationship just where you love Hashem, where you're doing it only out of love. And the person, the Bar Tanura, actually asked this question. If you take a look in Masechet Avot, the Mishnah in Avot says, Al tiyu ka'avadim, don't be like the slaves, the servants, hamishamshim et harav, that serve their master, al menat lekabel peras, in order to get a prize. Don't be like the servant that serves the master in order to get a prize. Rather, be like a servant who serves the master because he wants to serve the master. That's what the Mishnah says. And then the Mishnah ends, and let the fear of heaven be upon you. Esther Bar Tanura, I don't understand. You just told me I should want to do it for the right reason, not for the reward, or ostensibly not for the punishment. And then you finish telling me that there should be the fear of heaven on me? Says the Bar Tanura, a person who serves God with love, it's up to him when and where he decides to serve God. If he's not feeling it, he's out. A person needs the yirah to ensure the awe, the fear, the respect, in order to ensure that maybe at a time when there's not so much ahava, he's still doing the right thing. That's, I think, what this Gemara is telling us. You might have times when a child is doing everything right. What do you think? Why is there discipline necessary? The answer is that the kid is doing it because he wants to. But now you have a child that learned to do all the things that he wants to do. And Baruch Hashem, he wants to do a lot of good things. But what will happen in his life the first time he meets a mitzvah, he doesn't want to do. And he's only ever done mitzvot because he loves doing mitzvot. Not because he has to do mitzvot. Why do we do mitzvot? Because we love to, or because we have to? Both. If it's only love to, what happens when you don't love to? If it's only have to, it's not sustainable. Because eventually you're going to just chuck the whole thing. You need to have this mixture. And that's what the Gemara is talking about.
Just a question. Here, it's talking about binecha.
Yeah.
So how you make from this one an answer for teacher and the...
Shaliach Bedin.
Yeah.
So the obligation, it's funny, I was just giving the class downstairs, the obligation of a rabbi is the same as the obligation of the father. Because the Gemara says, anyone who teaches his friend's son Torah, ma'alev alav hakatub, the Torah considers it ki'ilu yilado, as if you gave birth to that person. Okay? So your students are your children.
That's why you say you understand for the two, not for the last one.
Yeah, I don't, but that's not why. The reason why I don't understand it is because the Gemara says, what would be if he learned and he didn't get hit, so therefore it's not a mitzvah. With the father and the rabbi, that logic makes sense to me. The Shaliach Bedin only enters the picture when there's a punishment that's necessary. the father and the rabbi are in the picture, even in the pre-moments. Like, if you educated him well enough, maybe he wouldn't need this. And maybe if you were a better father, he wouldn't need to be hit, So you were there before. The Shaliach Bedin, he only enters your life once you're already in court.
When you transgress.
So where would there be a scenario where it's gamir without this for a Shaliach Bedin?
But knowing that it's there is important, that the Shaliach Bedin is there in case you
step out of line. Right. Yes, absolutely. Which might even be part of this last answer of the Gemara. Okay, so now we understand that these things are part of a mitzvah, and when a person is doing it as part of the mitzvah, then it's not, then the halakha would be that you do not get galut. But one of the things that we've learned already is that in order to be considered a mitzvah, it needs to be, that there wasn't another way to do it, where this would not be necessary. So as an example, let's say your father says, get me a cup of hot coffee. You went out to chop wood, right? To make a fire, to boil the water, when you could have turned on the kettle. So the chopping of the wood is not a mitzvah. I could think of, by the way, other examples that are a mitzvah, and I don't know why the Gemara didn't bring them.
such as
Can anyone think of it? What mitzvah in the Torah do we have where it's a mitzvah to chop wood? I'm tricking you a little bit.
Isn't that for the
Sukkah?
Mizbeah?
No, because that's what you just said. You could find that wood.
No, you can find.
Take the cedar wood to Egypt, so we have it for.
But that wouldn't be a mitzvah. That's not a mitzvah specifically to chop the wood. The case of a person wood chopping where he's chayav, where it's a mitzvah, is if there's an asherah tree. If there's a tree that's used for avodah zarah in Israel, the pasuk says v'nitatztem ota.
to destroy it.
You have to chop down that tree.
Wow.
So there's a mitzvah in the chopping. I tricked you because I said chopping wood. I didn't say chopping a tree. If I would have said chopping a tree, maybe you would have got it. But I felt that was too obvious. Was that too obvious, or was it just too obvious to me?
I wouldn't have gotten it.
You would not have gotten it? Okay, fine. So that would be an example of wood chopping, which is a mitzvah. Now, how do you know the pasuk is talking about that? I don't have to prove that the pasuk's talking about it. You have to prove that the pasuk's not talking about it. The pasuk says if he chopped wood, galut. You're saying that you learn from there that it's only voluntary. Why there's a wood chopping that's not voluntary? The first two examples the Gemara gave, Gemara answered.
That tree you can burn, and you don't have to chop it. So there are other ways to achieve the destruction of the tree.
Interesting. Maybe you could burn the tree. You could burn the tree, so you have to chop it
Therefore, It's
down.
not a mitzvah.
Okay, I like the answer.
How about if it's added?
But you still need to destroy it.
Yeah.
Would that count? In other words,
You mean you?
it's not chopping. It's not the specific act. You would need to destroy it.
Except
can't
the
allow-
Mizbeah say you need to chop it or you need to destroy it. What's the
Yeah,
mention
is
say?
destruction the end point?
Exactly. It says this Revum Ba'esh. It says v'nitatztem. It says both. But I don't know if it means that you have to do both. It may mean one or the
We're
other.
starting the process.
We'll have to learn the halachot of Etzeh Asherah. We'll look it up in Harambam after the class.
What if it means it's a mitzvah because you're adding to the quality of what you're doing? Like Pesach, you can say, okay, it's a mitzvah to X, Y, Z, but you're now even going out of your way to add to it. So what if that person considers the chopping of the wood adding to, or not adding the mitzvah, but making the mitzvah more beautiful, and therefore it's a mitzvah?
So I would have called that a mitzvah. But the Gemara is saying, in order to be counted as a non-voluntary act, it needs to be that you're obligated in this act. Remember, what was the whole drasha? That chopping wood is voluntary. If something is not voluntary, i.e. obligatory, then, right, in such a case, you're not in the Goldilocks of what's it called? Of galut. So if I'm choosing to make my mitzvah a better mitzvah, it's already choice. It needs to be that I have no choice. And maybe that's why your answer is a good answer. Maybe you could just burn it. I don't know. We'll have to look. We'll have to take a look.
But you don't like that answer. So
No, it's not. I don't know. I just said I don't know. We have to check.
Okay.
If you're allowed to destroy it. And also, is the act of destruction. I want you to hear my question.
You're starting the process.
If I'm
though.
obligated to destroy it, is the act of chopping it down considered
Mitzvah or-
voluntary or not? I think it's still called obligated. The fact that I could also achieve this by another means of destroying the tree, maybe that's not good enough. In other words, in the case before, we said maybe the kid would not need to be hit. So if you're eliminating completely the possibility, then this is not obligatory.
Yeah, but what about the
Here, we're not eliminating the obligatory. No, there you're finding the wood.
So
There's not another way to
No,
get
you're
the wood
looking for
out of the ground.
you can look at the wood, and then you don't need to chop.
What do you mean?
You can look at the wood for your sukkah, and then you don't need to.
No, what do you mean, look, I still need to go get it. I need to bring it home. So you could find wood that's already chopped,
Yeah.
or a tree that fell down in the forest. Okay? You could find that. But, so therefore, the chopping itself is not obligated. That's not compared to this case. Here, you're obligated to destroy it. So this form of destruction is obligatory. It doesn't mean that I need to do it this way,
Yeah, but the same way you don't.
but it's still obligated.
If you
Yes.
don't have to,
You see the difference?
you have an option.
1 minute. I'm just pointing out the difference. In this case of not obligated, you need to do nothing. So that's not the same as here. Where in the case that we're talking about, right? If the tree is there, you need to destroy it.
Right.
You could destroy it like this or destroy it like this. But either way, you need to do an act of destruction, which means that the chopping is still an act, it's an obligation. I'm not saying it definitively.
The end result, isn't that the important thing? You're starting a process. Like you were saying about saving your daughter, you could have called the lifeguard or you could have gone in yourself. At
Yes.
the end of the day, the mission was to save your daughter.
Correct.
The mission is to destroy the tree.
Correct. But in either scenario, I had to save her. So when I do the act of saving, that's something that I had to do. I could have done it in another
Calling the
way.
lifeguard.
I could have done it in another way, but I had to save her.
You started a process to save her.
Regardless, I had to do that.
Right.
That's the difference over here and the first case. Now, I'm not saying definitively. I don't know, which is what makes it a good question.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe it's a good answer. Maybe it's not enough. Maybe even though we could find another way to do it, you could still look at the act of chopping as an obligation because I have an obligation to destroy it. I might be able to destroy it in another way, but I would still be obligated to destroy it. In both of the other two cases, you might have found wood, and then what did you do? Nothing. The child might have not needed to be disciplined, and then what did you do? Nothing. You're not still obligated to do something else. So we're unsure yet on this quasi act of obligation. All right, because we're not sure if that counts or not. Let's see. Hadar Marava. Okay, so we the first thing that we said, the first answer of Rava, if we turn back, right, was Rava's answer on this Chativat Etzim, on obligatory versus voluntary.
Can I
Had-
get some water?
Yeah, I need some water. Yeah, sorry, Mechila.
I think you gotta do like a daily something to soothe your throat.
No, I need to when I wasn't feeling well, and then you push it like I did on Shabbat.
Sure. Okay.
My throat just can't handle it. And I have a wedding to do today. All right.
Do you distinguish between a saw and chopping with an axe?
What do you mean?
If you were talking about other ways of destroying the tree, you could pour acid on it, you could inject it with poison, or would a saw where one or two people had to saw it be different than the axe?
Nathan, you sound
You
like
can baronet.
you sound like a tree serial killer. That was like a lot of ways to kill a tree on the spot there.
Or burning the tree.
Burning the tree was the one he suggested. Right? Burning the tree was the one he suggested. So,
One second.
yeah, let me wait a minute.
Yes.
My voice is not working yet.
Do you like ice in your water?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I just need to get something. Thank you. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, שהכל נהיה ברוך.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Hada Amar Rava. So up until this point, that's how Rava explained the reason that Abba Shaul spoke about this distinguishing between an obligation and something that was voluntary. Where did he learn it from? From the fact that he said Chativat Etzim. The pasuk says that you're chopping wood. Is chopping wood voluntary or obligatory? It's voluntary, and therefore everything needs to be voluntary. Hadam Rava. Rava then said, no, lav milti hidamri. What I said before, I've got a better answer. It's not strong enough. Rather, the pasuk says, "Va'asher yavo et reo bayar," and if he comes with his friend into the forest, that if the ibaye ayil, the ibaye lo ayil, is clearly stating if he went in, meaning that he could have or he could not have. V'isa kadaitach mitzvah, and if the answer is if this is a mitzvah to go and do, misage de lo ayil. Does he have an option to not go? I love the idea that the Gemara is looking at this and thinking, if you have a mitzvah, obviously you're going. There's no if. I love that that's like so clear to the Gemara. Once we know it's a mitzvah, of course you're going. There's not even a question. Okay. Misag lo ayil, amalei Rav Ada bar Ava l'Rava. Rav Ada bar Ava said to Rava, Kol hecha dechtiv asher di ibayehu. You want to tell me that every time it says the word asher, it means if, right? Because that's what your new explanation, which is not based on the chopping of wood, which is voluntary, but rather is based on the word asher, which says if, meaning that the entire episode was voluntary. Okay? You want to tell me that every time it says asher, it's voluntary? Elameata. Thank you very much. We learn from here. Let's take a look. The ish asher yitma velo yitchata. The pasuk says, the ish, and a man, asher, if he yitma, he becomes tameh, and he does not become pure. So we've already described this. That is, there's a isur for a person to come in tameh into the Beit Hamikdash. You can't walk into the Beit HaMikdash when you're tameh. And we've actually mentioned this quite recently, that therefore, no Jew, we hold halachically, obviously there are other people that disagree, but almost all the poskim hold that a person is not allowed to go on Har HaBayit today. We're not allowed to go on Temple Mount. So you have this whole, stairwell, and the whole fighting for us to be able to be there. I get why that's important politically, but halachically, we're not allowed to be there. Now, neither are they by our laws, but they're not listening to our laws. Okay? So, a person, if a person becomes impure and he does not become pure, he goes onto the Har HaBayit, he's chayav mitah. Ibai, chayav karet. Ibai mitame, ibai lo mitame. Do you want to say, right, that it's talking about a person who, if he wants to, he can. If he wants to, he doesn't have to. Met mitzvah de lo sagi de lo mitame hachanami di patur. Rav Ada bar Ava asks a bomb question. Aren't there cases where a person has an obligation to become tameh? Let's give the case where everybody has an obligation to become tameh. Where does everyone have that obligation? If you see a body on the side of the road that has no one to bury it, the halacha is met mitzvah. Everyone needs to become tameh to be able to bury it, including, by the way, the Kohen Gadol. Excellent. Yeah?
So there is no if.
So therefore, there's no if. So therefore, a person who's tameh because of a met mitzvah, you're going to tell me he's allowed to go into the temple impure because it says v'ish asher yitma, if, meaning the way you say it, it's an if that you could if you want and not if you don't want. The Gemara answers, shani hatam, that's different in the case of tumah. Why? The Amar Kira, because the pasuk over there says, Tameh yihiyeh. We've come across this derasha many times. Whenever you see the word yihiyeh, it means hu b'havayato yihiyeh. In other words, yihiyeh means you will be. You will be means regardless. I'll give you an example of this. We just had in the parasha yesterday. The pasuk says, V'hit kadishtem, and you will sanctify yourselves, V'hiyitem kedoshim, and you will become holy. The Chachamim say, what does that mean? You just told me, if you make yourself holy, you'll be holy. What is V'hitem? You V'hit kadashtem, and you will make yourself holy, and you will be holy. That's obvious. Those two things are the same thing. The Chachamim explain it to mean, V'hit kadishtem means, and you attempt, you strive, you go to a class, even if you don't understand it. You're coming to shul, even if you're not connecting to prayer. You're doing everything you can to become holy. You know what the pasuk says? V'hitem kedoshim. And you will become holy. By hook or by crook, God says, I will help you get there. If you want it enough, I'll help you get there. If you're trying, I'll help you get there. So the word yihiyeh means it is, it will be. It's a statement of fact.
It's not a future tense. You will become holy.
It means you will become. But it means you will become regardless. So therefore, since the pasuk says, Tameh yihiyeh, your purity, your impurity, is a de facto existence, right? Therefore, mikol makom, it comes to exclude any exclusion. You got that double negative? Yes. So you said to me if, which would have said that there might be a tum'ah that doesn't count, but then you said the word yihiyeh, where you basically, the word asher narrowed the explanation. The word yihiyeh, right, widened the explanation. Let me give you an example of this on a legal level. Let's say a person says, I can collect the rent on the 15th day of the month. Right? Now, technically, if you miss the 15th and you come to me on the 16th day of the month, what could I tell you by pointing at the contract?
No more than 15.
You can't collect, you missed the deadline. How about if he says, you could collect on the 15th day of the month, and then in the same contract it says, or any day that you choose to. Can I say, well, but it says the 15th, today's the 16th. What does the guy say?
Any day.
But it says, or any. That's an example of an exclusion followed by an inclusion. So it said asher, which would have excluded any person that was not doing it voluntarily. And then it said yihiyeh, meaning de facto. Tameh, you're gonna be. Yeah? That includes any scenario, even if the person was obligated. The Gemara says, you want to use tameh yihiyeh for that? We already used it for something else. Okay? When sometimes you have a derasha, and it's called mufneh, it's open. You're able to be used for a derasha. But if you're using it for A, you can't then use it for B. You know why? Because that little extra thing, you know that it's going to tell you something. Now that you found something for it to tell you, you don't know that it's going to tell you something else. Okay? Let's continue, says the Gemara. How can you use it for that? Hahu mibayale kidetanya. We use it for what it says in the Braita. The Braita tells us, Tameh yihiyeh lirabot tivul yom. That comes to include tivul yom. What's a tivul yom? Tivul yom means that there's a certain type of person that he needs tevilah. But when he goes to the mikveh, even after he goes to the mikveh, he needs to wait until the day passes. Okay? He needs that time. He needs that time lapse. So this guy is like quasi-impure. He's like fulfilled some of the conditions, but not all of them. Would you say that that guy also gets karet? The Gemara says, yep, tameh yiyeh. If he's tameh in whatever way, karet, he can't go on harabayit. Then the Braita continues. Tum'ah tobo. The pasuk continues and says, his tum'ah is in him. Lerabot michusar kippurim. There's a case where a person has dipped in the mikveh, he's got his time and his mikveh done, but he needs his korban to be brought. So in order to become pure, he needs the weight, the mizbeh, the mikveh, and the korban. So let's say he got all those done except for the korban. Still, tumato bo means if he has any tumah left in him. In other words, it's not done yet because he didn't bring the korban. Also, that person is not allowed to be there. Tameiyeh. So, therefore, we see that word tameiyeh is already used for something else. Amaleh, he answered him, Ana me'od tumato ka'amina. When I said that this tum'ah is there, regardless, I was deriving it from the pasuk where it says od tumato, more. In other words, still is tumah's mind. Let's see the whole pasuk now. Take a look at the pasuk. The pasuk says, you touch a dead body, and you did not become pure. Et mishkan Hashem timeh. Look at the pasuk. We're following the pasuk now. Et mishkan Hashem timeh. He has defiled the holy place of Hashem. He gets the onesh, the punishment of karet. For the waters of the para aduma, right, were not thrown upon him. Tameh he will be. Od tumatobo. Still his tumah is in him. So we use tameh for something. What? For tevul yom, for when he needs the day. We use tum'ato bo to tell you something else. For what? For when he has the day and the mikveh, but he does not have the korbanot. So how do you know the case where he was obligated to become tameh? Rava answers, it says od tum'ato bo. Still is his tum'ah. What does that od mean? Still his tum'ah is by him. Now, if you look at Rava, you're like, really, Rava? Is that what you meant? Then why did you say tameh? If you meant od, why did you say tameh? That's the word right before od. He was saying tameh, the guy is tameh regardless. So I didn't mean specifically that part. There's an extra word there, od, that's where I'm deriving it from. So therefore, in a scenario where the guy is impure by obligation, the halakha would be, right, he still becomes tameh. Why is that relevant to our Gemara? Because let's track it back. Rav Ada bar Ava asked, if you say asher means if, I have a problem with the if of the pasuk by tum'ah, because then met mitzvah, where you were obligated to become tameh, should not be chayav. Rava counters with and says, you're right. That case is an anomaly of asher. Why? Because we have a specific pasuk telling us that if is not true. We included by saying tameh or by saying od. So therefore, that asher is not a good example. But any other asher says if, meaning you have a choice. Okay? And that's Rava's answer. And therefore, Rava says in our pasuk, where it says the word asher yavo, when you're going to come into the forest. If you come into the forest means that you have an option to not come into the forest. And therefore, it's only when it's for an obligation, a voluntary, but never for an obligation. Okay? We're going to pick up here, Be'ezrat Hashem, next session. On Tuesday.